Hello, and welcome to Indy Talks, the monthly interview show brought to you by the Hudson Independent, the most trusted source of local news in the river towns. I'm Barrett Seaman. My guest today is Mayor Vincent Rossillo of the village of Dobbs, Ferry. Mayor Rossillo, in his day job, is a labor lawyer. Is that a term that's all right to use, Mayor?
Yes, I'm an attorney that represents a number of labor unions.
Right.
So, yes.
Okay. But you have been a trustee of the village. We're a trustee of the village for what, 4 terms before you ran for mayor?
Yes, since I think 2011, I think.
Right. So you ran for mayor. You were elected in November of 2019 and took office just about the time that the pandemic struck. Not something that you would have possibly looked forward to going in there. So now that we've more or less gotten through it, at least we hope we've gotten through it, how do things look coming out of the pandemic? What sort of shape is the village in? How have businesses done? What's your assessment overall?
Barrett, at first we was very, very worried about the village finances. We had a lot of unexpected expenses, as you could imagine. We had to pay for a lot of equipment, masks, and all that equipment that's necessary to maintain a healthy workforce. So we were very concerned, but it turns out that we are in much better shape than we had anticipated. Our budget, we just passed it in May. It's a solid budget, and the receipts that we have gotten, the income has been similar to previous years. So I think we're on a good financial basis. I think a lot of that is because most of our income comes from property taxes, and fortunately, people haven't been able to pay their property taxes. So we have not really seen a big dip in income.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have lost some businesses in the village who weren't able to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has put some stress on our downtown. So we are looking to everything we can do to increase the businesses in downtown. Although I do think 1 or 2 businesses have opened up during this pandemic.
Right.
So interesting.
Businesses that you thought had gone under permanently are coming back?
They're coming back. We were really concerned about the restaurants, and I think we've done everything that we can. I think to help the restaurants, we've passed laws with the parklets so that people can eat and drink outside. Um, and that has been a really great because the restaurants are really important to Dobbs Ferry. I think that's we're known for our restaurants, and people seem to love to eat and drink outside. So it's been a really great blessing that we were able to do that, and I think that has sustained the restaurants.
I want to get into that a little later. A couple of years ago, I interviewed your predecessor, Bob McLaughlin, and he was talking about some pretty ambitious plans the village had to improve its infrastructure, one of which was possibly burying the utility wires around town, which is a very expensive proposition, as you know. Where does that stand? Is that still a possibility?
Honestly, I think it's a slim possibility. As you indicated, it's a very expensive proposition. We have met with representatives of Con Ed, and we're trying to nail down really what that cost would be. But it's not just a cost to the village, it's also a cost to the landlords. So we would have to have each landlord downtown be able to, pay for the connection with the Con Ed. And the businesses have really had such a great disruption in the last year and a half. And we do have a grant to redo the sidewalks on Main Street, and that would transform it, I think, with new bricks and new trees. And we would love to be able to bury the utility lines as well, but it's a big, expensive, long project. So I don't know if that's really going to happen. I would love for it to happen, and we're going to look to see what the cost will be. But We will do the downtown sidewalks, but I can't say that the utility lines would be part of that.
So this isn't the perfect time to ask businesses to fork over money to bury utility wires,
Exactly.
right? You mentioned before the parklets for the restaurants, which are wonderful in terms of allowing the restaurants to seat more customers during these summer months. But they also take up an awful lot of parking spaces. I noticed that several of the ones on Cedar Street there have not one parklet, but three in front of them. So how is the parking situation? I know you've got a new lot down there near Palisades that's been helpful for relieving it, but are you still getting complaints about the lack of parking?
No, I'm not at this particular time. I don't know if it's because of the economy, but we have not gotten complaints about it. You know, we like to say that Dobbs Ferry downtown doesn't really have a parking problem. We have a walking problem. I think, you know, that new lot on Cedar Street is woefully underused. People you don't really want to park there and walk. And I realize Dobbs Ferry is a hilly place to live and shop. But we were concerned with the complaints regarding parking when we approved those parklets, because as you indicated, some people have taken up 3 parking spots. But so far we have not really had an issue with complaints of parking.
Right. Complicating the issue of parking and traffic and all that is the proposition to build a bicycle route or put in a bicycle lane from Route 9 all the way from Ossining down through Hastings. Um, that's problematic for a lot of businesses in the communities we live in. What's your reaction to that? Are you on board for the bicycle lane, or do you have stipulations you'd want to make?
No, I'm totally on board with it. I think it would be great for Dobbs Ferry. And like you've indicated, some of the communities, it runs right through their, you know, main part of their town, and it really affects the parking for them. But I think for us, it really wouldn't affect too much the parking situation. I think our parking problem really is on Main Street, Cedar Street. So I don't think the planned Route 9 initiative would really affect us too badly. I think it would be an opportunity for more people to ride bikes, you know, into town. I think it would be good for our downtown, the businesses, the restaurants. So I wholeheartedly support it.
Right. There is that one area where the intersection of Route 9 and Ashford Avenue down to where Cedar Street comes in, which is all Broadway, but seems to me that that is going to be a tough place to have a bike lane given the huge amount of traffic that runs through there.
Yeah, but I also think that there may be a push to put some of the bikes on to the aqueduct as
Right.
well. So if that does come to fruition, a lot of that traffic would be riding down on the aqueduct, which does open up other problems as well. I mean, people who are walking don't want to really be inundated with bicycle riders, and so I get that. So that is a balance, and it could be a problem over there, and we'll have to keep an eye on it and watch it. I think, you know, it's still early on in the stages of planning it, and we have to see what the final plan would be like. But as it is now, I think would be fine, and I think Dobbs Ferry would certainly benefit from it.
There is, at the end of the aqueduct where it hits Cedar Street, there's a pretty steep climb and stairs there. So that is not exactly amenable to bicycle traffic.
True. I agree with that. I do ride that almost once a week or so, and I know that it is a problem. You have to, you do have to push that bike up there. So yeah, I agree. But I think it will be fine. I think it's a good benefit for Dobbs Ferry certainly.
Right. During this past year, you had a couple of unfortunate incidents that I would label or put under the label of extremism. One of which was last May, you had some people from the Patriot Front USA hanging a very provocative banner across the Ashford Avenue Bridge. That was confiscated by Dobbs Ferry Police. Can you tell me a little bit about the aftermath of that? Is there any more information as to who these people were, where they were from? Are they from Dobbs Ferry?
No, I know the police department, has opened an investigation, and I believe that it's still an active investigation. I don't think they were able to, at this stage, identify anyone who's responsible for it. Um, you know, I've been a trustee for a long time, and it's my first term as the mayor, and this is one of those things that I never expected to be dealing with as the mayor. It's really it's sickening and saddening that we have to deal with this type of extremism, as you point out, in our village. So, but we have to address it. I think the only, we can't overlook it, and to that end, the village has, created for the first time a human rights diversity committee. So I, went through many people who applied for this position, a lot of volunteers, all volunteers who were interested in being part of this committee. And they come from all types of backgrounds. And this committee will address situations. And I hope, proactively, we will have public forums on, educational forums on bias and diversity, and everybody will be welcome to contribute. We've also, as a village, at the last Board of Trustee meeting, as a matter of fact, we listened to a presentation by a group that we believe would be good to train our entire staff on bias training. So we're moving in that direction. We want to have every village employee be trained on it, be trained on how to be sensitive to all of people from all different types of backgrounds. We've had a number of rallies in the village. We've had large rallies at Waterfront Park. I've heard people speak at those. I was really heartbroken to hear that some people from different types of backgrounds don't feel comfortable in Dobbs Ferry. They don't feel welcome. And I never thought that I would hear that about Dobbs Ferry. So we really have made an effort to make everyone feel welcome. Everyone, whether they live here or shop here or work here, no one should feel uncomfortable or not welcome in our village.
One of those large rallies that you talked about, I believe, came in direct response to another incident, which was where some T-shirts were placed in the driveways and homes of some newly arrived families who were people of color. And they were pretty, it wasn't overt, but it was pretty clear what the message was, is you're not welcome here. What was your response to that? You participated, I think, did you not, in some of those rallies?
I did. I've spoken at those rallies. Again, it's very sad and sickening to hear that people feel that they are not welcome solely because of their color. I was shocked by it. I know the police were doing an investigation, and I think that's still an ongoing investigation, although I don't think anyone has been identified yet. It opened up my eyes to see that people who live and work here are not welcome to it. And I reached out to people who spoke, and I reached out to representatives of Children's Village, St. Christopher's, and I've put some of those people on the Human Rights Committee so that we can get their sense, their involvement. I think for too long, maybe not everyone felt part of this community. And I think that's one of my main goals, is to make everyone feel part of this community. This is it's a village that's been in existence for a long time. And as these river towns have changed over the course of generations, and generations of people have lived here and worked here, but it's a different community now. And I think everyone just has to realize that change is good and that we have to change.
Mm-hmm. Right. Speaking of change, another thing that happened on your watch is the establishment by order of the governor of a committee to examine police, how the police force works, and to come up with recommendations. on how to change, if to change, the way the police function. In Here in New York State, I think there are something like 500 different municipalities that have police forces, all of which had to do these reports. Um, you were chairman of that committee, as I recall. So tell me what you took away from that process, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about what may result from those reform committees.
Well, Dobbs, we're lucky in the sense that Dobbs Ferry Police is one of the very few communities in New York State that have already been accredited by New York State. So we already undergo a very thorough and stringent review by New York State in order to be approved and accredited by them. So our manuals had been pretty much up to date. But what I think the takeaways are one, I mean, the police department was very open, the police chief, and we had, I think, three other officers as part of the committee. They were all very open to change and suggestions. They provided a lot of information. So, I mean, that was heartening in the fact that the police department was willing to work with us and to acknowledge that some change would be necessary. And I think one of the biggest changes necessary is going to be the use of the cameras,
Body
body
count. Yeah.
cams. That's right, body cams. So I think that will be very helpful. The problem again is in the details. It's very expensive, and the data collection and the data maintenance of the video recordings are again expensive. Where do you store it? How do you store it? And there are also state laws now regarding evidence and how quickly you have to turn evidence over to the defense and the prosecutor. So those issues we have to work on, but I don't want to lose sight of that, and I have asked the chief to look at what grants are available to institute to getting the body camera equipment, and also the training on how to use it, how to store it, how to maintain it. So, but I do think that will be everybody, it would work out for everybody to have body cams. I think residents would feel better, and I think the police department would feel better about it. I also think that more, training for the police department is important. We all have, we don't want to admit it, but we all have biases, right? So if they could be trained regularly on bias training, and how to deal with situations, de-escalation. If we had a bigger police department, or maybe we had even discussed maybe working with the county mental health crisis
Right.
community to maybe how do we de-escalate situations? Do you need to have a police officer at all situations, or should there be someone who travels with the police or who's available with the police to help de-escalate a situation? The domestic violence situations, or these cases where, and you've read this nationwide, where a girlfriend or a wife calls the police department, and the last thing they expected was their partner to be shot and killed.
Right.
So that's the last thing they wanted, but it happens, it escalates. So how do we avoid those situations, and how do we de-escalate a situation without getting into violence? And I think that's really important for the police department to train in, maybe come up with a solution or a partnership perhaps with the county.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk that the county might provide such service to all of the villages. Uh, but it seems to me that that would require quite a bit of staffing to have somebody available on short term to go into a situation at 3 in the morning. So the logistics of it are not simple.
I know, and it's really again one of those situations where when the person who calls the police, the last thing they expect is their partner or anyone they were related to be shot and killed, or badly hurt. So I think if this de-escalation or training is really important, so that things don't get out of hand, things don't get carried away, and it happens so quickly as we saw throughout the country. So it's one of the biggest concerns that I have, and I think the police department is concerned with too, how these problems just escalate so quickly.
Yeah. I think Greenberg was talking about training 911 operators to be able to discern as to what should go to the police and what should go to a mental health expert. That's pretty, I wouldn't want that burden on me.
I know, because it can quickly turn into violence against the person who called the police, right? So the next thing you know, the mental health crisis counselor is caught in the middle and their life is at stake as well
Yeah.
as the person who called. So it's a, it takes a lot more than my expertise, that's for sure, to decide.
One of the things that several of the police departments in the river towns called for is reform of the hiring rules for the police. They feel that they're hamstrung by the rule of three, I think they call it, where they have to take the top three scores on the tests countywide rather than be able to choose people who are locally who live locally and may not have scored just as high, but are otherwise qualified. You endorse that, and do you see any changes coming?
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is an important issue. I do think, one, that we should have a police force that does have more minorities and people of color in it. We do have, you know, uh, you know, we have Asian, and some, and the police chief himself is a Latino. But I do want to have more people of color on the police force, and it has been difficult with the civil service laws. And we're right next to New York City, which is one of the most multi-ethnic places you can be. But yet, to get someone from the Bronx or Queens or Manhattan as a police officer is almost impossible because of the civil service laws. So,
Right.
um, right, and so the pool of people that we are drawing from is very small, because of all the other communities are also want to draw from that same pool of people.
What is the process going to be going forward out of that police reform movement? Will the state kind of aggregate all the recommendations and come up with its own plan for everybody? Or is it going to be left to the individual communities to decide?
I don't know. I think I think the state may look it over and say if we just met basic requirements. But I do think, I don't know for sure, but the Dobbs Ferry, we're going to meet again. We've resolved to meet again in 6 months after our first meeting to see
Mhm.
where we are in this, because I don't want it to get lost. It was an important mission that we performed, and I don't want to get those key reforms lost. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, what about the body cams? I do want to follow up on all those issues. Right now, we are moving forward with further accreditation from the federal government. Called a CALIA accreditation. So we've approved, you know, uh, mm, thousands of dollars for further training and education and record keeping, so we can move getting towards that CALIA accreditation. But there are still many other things that we have to follow up with. So we are committed to following up on it, and we will meet again.
Right. I noticed in the four villages that we cover, Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, not one of those commissions came up with anything that sounded like defunding the police. If anything, the budgets are going to be increasing to pay for a lot of the things you talked about here. Did that come up in your committee? Was there a faction of the group who were in favor of defunding police?
No, not really. There was some talk about, again, if we could take some money from the police department and maybe put it towards other types of counselors. But, we're a small village, and I don't think we're equipped to have uh, mental health crisis counselor in that situation. So it would have to go through either the town or the county. So we really did, I think people understood that. And I don't think that we really had too much of a call for just defunding the police.
Right. Um, I was interested in the presentation that the board received last week, I guess it was, from your attorneys about the legalization of marijuana in the state, which it's now legal, but a whole lot of things have to be decided about whether or not communities want to have dispensaries or marijuana bars in their jurisdiction. What did you take away from that presentation, and where do you think Dobbs is going to go?
Well, as you were there, so you know that there was some very emotional people there. So I
Yes.
think so. It's a very emotional topic on both sides, and I think we kind of have to make it clear that if the time to argue whether it should have been legalized has passed, right? So it's a law and it's legal. So whatever your personal feelings are about that, it's too late to complain about the past legalization of it. So I think the board, there's a strong feeling on the board to approve the dispensaries, but we'll have to get more information on it. I think one of the biggest problems is, the New York State hasn't really give us too much guidance. They've passed it, but they're really have not put in the rules and regulations regarding implementing it and what it will be. So it's difficult to approve something when you don't know what all the ramifications will be. And I know a lot of the communities are struggling with that, as we are. But I do think there is strong support for dispensaries in Dobbs Ferry.
It's interesting. The way I heard the presentation, it sounded to me like it was kind of making people lean towards opting out, at least in this first year, until these rules are clarified. And then you have another chance next year to come back in. Sounds like you're maybe going the other way and you want to get in there first.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we pass it first. Again, we're still in the early stages of it, and I really haven't polled the board yet, and it's still too early for them to formalize an opinion. But I do think it is a possibility that Dobbs Ferry will be one of the early
Right.
proponents of passing it, of opting in.
Would you favor having some sort of survey of the public, or what's the term I'm
Well,
looking for?
we've had this public forum, and we're going to have another public forum. I think the public is more than I would want them to be involved. But I
Right.
don't know if I want to have a survey per se, but we'll see.
Interesting. One last question has to do with the way meetings are done now. We're coming out of the era of Zoom. You're now having public meetings, but I noticed that you've got a sort of a hybrid system, which a lot of the other villages do too, where people are able to watch on Zoom and able to ask questions. You see that becoming a permanent way of doing it, or is this just a transition?
No, we were lucky in the sense that we got some money and we put it towards our system during the pandemic. We built out the system, and it's a great system. We weren't able to do this previously, but I think we're now well positioned to have this hybrid system. So I think it'll be great if we could have our experts Zoom in and residents can watch it. So I definitely think that'll be the way we go forward, moving forward.
Right. Very good. Mayor Rossillo, this has been very informative and helpful. I appreciate it. Will you be running again next time?
I'm running right now, so the election is November. So despite the craziness from the pandemic, I'm looking forward to it, and I thank you for allowing me to this time speak with you.
It's been our pleasure, and my dog thanks you too.